So, okay, we're recording. All right. So last week, everyone, I want to make sure that I'm not writing off the visualizer here so you guys can see it. So I'm just going to set it up here. So last week, we talked about this thing called planning, and this idea of planning, those of you here tonight actually did get into the discussion and create the distinction between planning and scheduling that you did. I believe the assignment had you go offline, do some searching on the internet, which there are just a gazillion articles that you probably could read, probably a few videos that speak to the difference between when you're planning a project and scheduling a project. And in construction, since this is what our focus is in this program, it is with great obvious intentions why we would be talking about these two things, because we have, as I look at the names here tonight, all of us have worked on or in a construction project. Each of us has various years of experience, but we've all had a taste of it, all been involved with projects, and we know that there's a great deal of planning that goes into a project. And we've all probably been in a position where we've done ad hoc scheduling, right? When I say ad hoc is like, off the cuff type scheduling because of the necessity that maybe there wasn't any planning done. So we're scheduling in the moment. Or the ideal situation is that we plan the project, get what we need and understand to be what's in the project in terms of, like many of you said in your posts, resources, labor, materials, equipment, and an idea of, I think a few of you noted the what, the why, the how, the when, right? You're right on the money. Exactly it's all of those elements in the planning. And then when we actually get to the scheduling, it's the doing. I was thinking about that today. Scheduling is about, getting it done, or the doing part, right? I know it's simplified, but the doing of the work. And so doing is we're, actually getting it done, where the planning is the thoughtfulness of the doing. Which means to a certain extent, what I would say it would be like building it in our head, right? We're visualizing it, we're building it in our head, planning it, thinking about all the things that we need and what needs to be done, and then kind of putting that up on the board, so to speak. And then once that's all aboard, we kind of collect it and organize it. So there's just the process of transition from planning to scheduling, where I would call it, we've collected everything that we've planned here, we've organized it, and we start to look at the relationships that are developed between all of these things that we've shared in the planning process. And we begin to build something that is, and many of you saw this, and I mentioned it last week, time related. That is, we're actually dealing with an actual calendar. And that calendar then speaks to time and space and relationships between the resources and materials and the labor and the equipment and everything else that has to go on with the project. So it's a very intuitive thing. It's not something that you should force yourself to try and memorize or know, more specifically, outside of the fact that you probably have it innate. When I say innate, that this word here, innate, I think it's called, I'm not sure, but it's part of your bone structure. You just kind of know it. You don't really have to learn it, because it's just kind of in your bones, so to speak, because you've done it, you've been experiencing it, you've been part of it. So we formalize it with our education, because as we become more experienced, more involved with it, and as we learn to manage construction projects, we can step away from it and be more in a leadership capacity where we see the need to plan and bring everybody together to capture the information. And then once, as a leader or supervisor or manager, capture that information and then move to the scheduling piece, which is, okay, now I'm going to parse out that word parse, P-A-R-S-E. I'm going to parse out or start to separate, start to see the differences between what we planned and how they interrelate. And that's where we start to create that time relationship between the items that need to get done, and sequence them, put a time duration on them, find out what needs to go first, develop milestones. And through that scheduling, it's really the part of, now we got to execute and put all the parts and pieces together, which I've been saying is the doing part. Now this week, as we are doing more of taking what we've done here, which is planning and scheduling, and then taking that and seeing how we can now refine that skill. This is kind of broadly speaking, when we look at the comparison and contrasting these two elements, it's kind of looking at it from a very high bird's eye point of view. But now we want to then see how this looks in terms of the relationships we've established in our head, and start to see what are some of the tools and techniques that will allow us to do this piece extremely well as it relates to a construction environment. So this is all under the umbrella of construction management, if you will, but construction per se, that's our industry. But how then we can take these kind of broadly speaking concepts that we've talked about and learned about today, and refine them, develop some tools, what I like to call tools and techniques in my studies of project management, that these tools, techniques are broadly used by the professionals in project management, and they are tools and techniques that are used in the construction industry, at least if you're working with entities who know their worth and their where in the industry. And so I'll introduce to you tonight what I think is probably the most important tool to have in your belt, to pull out and to use for all types of construction planning, and that is a tool that we call the work breakdown structure, right? So I'm going to go ahead and pull this, and these notes that I take, I'll certainly create a PDF file. If you're drawing your notes or copying alongside me, that's great. I want this to be interactive. Again, this is being recorded so you can watch this again, but also too, I'll look to, if you want me to create a PDF file of my notes, then that you'll be able to have that to study as well. So this concept that I'm introducing, and I have an exercise. I'm just checking if you guys see anybody in the waiting room for a while, let me know, interrupt me. I'm just going to keep looking up and checking to see if anybody pops in like Rogelio. But anyway, so this tool that I'm talking about is called a work breakdown structure. And some of you may have come across it in your readings before. It's also called, in short, the WBS. This is very, very universal term, and really the core, I see it in my opinion, the core technique of planning, whether that is a construction project or an IT project, or the manufacturing of a Boeing aircraft project. It really is universally understood to be a marquee tool for planning any type of project, but in particular, in our case, being construction managers, it's perfect for construction management projects. So how does a work breakdown structure work? How do you create or develop a work breakdown structure? Well, part of what a work breakdown structure to me is, it's getting organized. It's kind of an organizational tool, but it's an organizational tool that speaks not so much to that you're being organized, which is what it is in a sense, but it also, through the effort of an organizational tool, allows you to, and the key word here is break down the work, right? So we break down the work of the project, and it's in this kind of organizational structure that we're showing. So this is kind of what it looks like. I'm just going to draw you a diagram, and I know you all have seen this before, because often you'll see in companies, they'll show org charts, and the org charts kind of look like this. And you can see I'm pretty good at drawing them, because I've done a lot of, well, organizational charts in my life as it relates to mapping out projects, right? Planning projects. And so in this case, you can see that if this is the CEO, if this was an organizational chart, this is the CEO, this would be all of the vice presidents. So, you know, this could be the CEO, this could be vice president of accounting, vice president of, it's a construction company, so it's vice president of construction, vice president of human resources, vice president of operations, let's say vice president of field engineers. I don't need, you know, vice president of, you know, diversity. You guys get the idea. And then underneath each of these vice president department heads, guess what? You've got more middle managers, right, that work underneath those vice presidents. Now I'm using this as an example, this organization chart as an example of a work breakdown structure. This is not a work breakdown WBS, but it's an example of one, because the example shows how it, as an organizational chart, breaks down what are company responsibilities within this organization. So you guys can kind of see what I've done there, right? You kind of see this, and this can continue, right? So you have the middle managers, then it goes down to the field managers. Oh my goodness, you know, you can see the granularity, right? This term called granularity. And it really is a business buzzword right now. I hate using business buzzwords, and I've been using this one a lot lately. Granularity, right? Granular, like grains of salt, very, very, very tiny, very, very minute. So you can see the process going from, in this case, our org chart from the CEO down, from top down. You can see we're getting more and more granular, right? We're getting more and more of these boxes, and that means we're really, if you will, breaking down, right? The breakdown of the organization, and you can see it's the embodiment of this particular structure. So now we take a look of what we have here, right? This extremely kind of complicated structure. And now what we're going to do is, this isn't now an org chart, right? This is now going to be a work planning chart, or a structure that's going to break down work. So can any of you, before I move on, just using your intuition, just using your common sense of what I shared, can you see how something like this would be workable? Because I'm looking at our roster here tonight, Jesse, Danny, Matt, and Brendan. I know all of you have construction experience. Can you see how this might be a workable tool? Let's say if I were to give you a remodel project, let's just use that example. Let's use an example of, let's call it a remodel project. This is our example, and I'm going to need your contribution here. A remodel project. This remodel project, let's say it's, let's call it a, you know, I could call it a kitchen remodel, but let's call it a house, an expansion, right? We're doing a remodel project. We're doing an expansion and to the house, to the residence. So we'll just call it an expansion. It's just a room. Maybe it's a room for the family. So maybe it's a place where we're gonna, put a pool table or a ping pong table, a family room where, we have some of those kind of recreational activities. So just kind of have an idea, and it's just going to be a room that we're going to extend off the side of the residence, nothing super complicated. So you kind of have a visual of this construction project. Now we're planning it. We are here tonight. We're going to plan this. You guys and I know enough about construction that we can plan this project. And so just in our heads, I'm not going to create the work breakdown structure, but I want to have a dialogue. So in effect, as you recall, as we learned about the difference between planning and scheduling, what are we doing? We're going to be doing this, right? We're not doing this. There'll be no discussion of this. This is what we're doing. We're planning. And so this planning tool called the work breakdown structure is what we're going to use to break down the work as we see it now, as we're planning it for this remodel project. More specifically, we're putting an expansion to an existing residence. So let's get started. Let's do some brainstorming here. This project is an expansion. So what we do at the very top box is that this is the project, right? This is what we call the expansion project. So I put EXP. We're going to expand this remodel expansion to the existing residence. So that's the project that's at the top of our chart of our work breakdown structure. Now I have all these boxes underneath it. What do these boxes represent? You guys help me out. What do you think, or how could how do we break down this project? What would be your first step, or what do you think would be your most intuitive first step looking at the need to have to break this project down?
The things that the owner, or the things you want to put in there, the main items.
Speak in your mic, Danny. You're real soft.
Oh, sorry.
If you can, if your mic's evident, or speak louder.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I would think that it would be the main things, the main materials that you was going to need, just the things that must do, I just think the core materials.
Okay, so
like ping pong table, furniture, sheetrock, material, just breaking it down into different things, electrical, plumbing.
Okay, let's start with that. Let's start with your first thought, because what first thing that came out of your mind, and I think you're right on it, is this idea of materials.
Okay.
Right?
Yes, sir.
So obviously we need materials. So that would be potentially one of the boxes, because if, let's say, for example, in our work breakdown structure, I'll use M here as our representative of materials, and I'm kind of using our key over here because our chart can't really put a lot of information in those tiny little boxes. But over here's our key. M is for materials. Danny, I think you, as you furthered your conversation, said, well, we're going to need drywall, we're going to need concrete, we're going to need, all these various types of materials. And you would be right? That's part of the work breakdown structure, particularly in a brainstorming session. If you're leading your project team as to, okay, we have Mr. Smith's remodel project, everybody, we're going to be expanding on his $1 million home. So this is a really nice project for our remodeling company. I brought you all in because you're going to be the crew that we found will be best to work on the project, but we have to develop the scope of the work because we're going to be teaming up with the architect, helping them out. So let's put together this work breakdown structure. Somebody like you, Danny, raises their hand and say, hey, well, we got to figure out what materials are going to be used. That's right. We're going to need the materials. So that would be one piece. What would be another piece that we would be thinking about?
Would subcontractors be on that one?
Yeah. So let's go ahead and put subcontractors, subs, right? So we'll need to, there's a lot of things having to do with subcontractors as work breakdown structure. Now you say to yourself, well, subcontractors, that's not any work as it relates to the project, but you would be wrong. Of course, it's a lot of work related to the project. In fact, what type of subcontractors do you think would be relevant to this type of project?
You want an electrician, plumber. If you're going to be installing the cabinets, then that's you. But most of the time, you'll probably get like a tile company to come do the backsplash and the countertop.
Right. So as an example, my org chart can't, cover everything you just said, but you said, I think 3 or 4 subcontractors that you would need. I put an E to represent, sorry, I don't know why I'm looking at the screen and you guys are probably seeing a blur like me. So hold on a second. Let me see if I can.
It was pretty good until I think it focuses on your pencil.
Oh, okay. Thanks for letting me know. I'll try not to do too much movement then in front of the picture.
Well,
Sorry
no, I
about
was saying it was actually good until you looked up, I guess.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it was all
Is
fine.
it clear now? Can you see it now?
Yeah, it's
Oh.
really good.
Okay. So you can see then under the S, which is like your suggestion, subs, I put an E and a P, obviously electrical plumbing, but we could expand upon that on that horizontal row. I think you mentioned finished tile person, flooring, it could be a carpeting person. If we're remodeling and expanding, there's probably some drywall subs that we'll have to bring in. That's the idea. Certainly, there is a number of work items that would be produced by the subcontractors that would be work relevant to this remodel. So that would be part of our planning. It would be needing to determine the work of the subcontractors, hiring the subcontractors, ensuring that we have a fair contract with them before we get started, right? There's a lot involved with the subcontractors. So you can see that is part of planning and putting together the project. Good, Jesse, good contribution there. So we've materials, subcontractors, what else might be there? So Jesse, Danny, thanks for your contributions. I'm going to ask if Matt or Brendan have an idea. What do you think else might be something that would be a breakdown of our remodel project here? What type of work breakdown do you think we would need to add there at that second level? We've got materials, we got subs, what else?
I mean, does like a job trailer and all the like the fences and all that kind of go under materials? I guess equipment could be part of it.
I think you would be right, Matt. Of course, in our past studies, and I like that you're thinking about, well, what have we studied in the past? Well, we have done site layouts, right? We've done site logistics. We don't know any more about this project other than the information I've given you. But if we assume, let's just say it's a $1 million home, it's on a cul-de-sac, but the lot's pretty large, but it's in a busy neighborhood. We got to consider the neighbors when we're doing this project. It's a fairly large expansion, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to think about site logistics. And that means, because let's assume it's going to be a complicated project, that we need to have a job trailer, or at least a small little job trailer somewhere located on the job site to be able to meet with the inspectors, to be able to review the plans when it's raining outside so we're not getting all wet. A place to meet with the subs to ensure that they understand the scope of the work and what they're doing. That space is really important on a project. So job trailer, I wouldn't call it specific to job trailer, but I think what we might call it is what we've called it in the past when we've studied in the other courses. Maybe we call it a job site logistics, or the construction setup, or however you want to arrange that. A staging area, that would be part of the project. So I'm going to go ahead and put SL for that, just because that's a good contribution, and that's site logistics. And so here in my key, I'm just going to put SL. Call it site logistics. Okay, good job, Matt. And in that way, site logistics covers everything that you mentioned. Job site trailer, where do we locate the Santa can? Because we got to get a temporary toilet out there for the workers. Certainly we're not going to let them go into a $1 million home to use the restroom in the house. That's ridiculous, and we wouldn't ask for that. That would be silly. We need a temporary fence, because we don't want people coming onto the project. We don't want, snoopy neighbors to, you know, sneak around inside the project and look at what we're doing. Because as we know, in $1 million neighborhoods, everybody is trying to, you know, figure out what everyone else is doing because they're very snoopy. I say that, but you know, that's probably not the case. But the idea is to create a safe construction environment. So we would need temporary fencing. To the extent of risk to the homeowners of valuables that they might have in the house. Maybe we set up security cameras. You know, I know I'm kind of going overboard, but you get the idea. We need to set the stage, right? There might be a need for lighting. There might be a need to bring in a generator, you know, or equipment. There might be the need to do some excavation work, right? So we might need to bring in a backhoe or bring in a heavy dump truck to excavate, to create space, to build additional foundation, whatever that might be. So the maneuverability of those pieces of equipment to get around the job site, you get it. We all get it. I'm saying stuff that you guys already know, but that would be part of developing a plan for this project that would need to be included in a work breakdown structure. So nice job. Brendan, come on, Brendan. I know you can come up with something. What's on your mind? Mr. Brendan, are you there? Are you there in spirit? Are you there at all? Or maybe your mic's not working. Okay, Brendan, I've got you on tape. I will come back and get you if you are out and you are, I guess, ghosting me. Anyway, all right. So Danny, I know you've got some ideas. What's on your mind? What else do you think we could add there? Just let's get a couple more. Maybe we got 3 more boxes. Let's fill them in. What do you think,
I would
Danny?
think about maybe the money that you've got to spend, your you know, how much that you've you know, if you've got an open checkbook, or is this something that you've got to stay within a budget, you know, things that you've got to do, if there's a time limit that this needs to be done in, and looking at what your availability of materials and things like that, what, you know, how far you're going to have to go to get this or that.
Okay. Okay. I think that when you say material availability, or at least having that conversation in this planning session about, well, are we going to be able to get available materials? I think that's a further breakdown of your original suggestion with the materials. That is, at this level, maybe we talk about what materials do we need. And so I'll give you an example. Maybe we need a particular sized glulam beam that requires you know, a particular camber, so it needs to be specific to the project. So that's going to require a customization and probably some shop drawings, probably, you know, meeting with a vendor to make sure that we have all that in place in terms of transport and can they meet our schedules, those types of things. So when you look at the work breakdown structure, if you see the screen,
Yes, I do.
where you have the materials, then you would have here, I'm pointing out, you know, the various materials, you know, maybe wood, concrete, drywall, etc. And then maybe underneath wood, you would have customized glulam beam. And then you would have additional information on the customized glulam beam speaking to, can we get it on time? What's the transport costs? Is there a local vendor that can actually do it for us, or do we have to go out of state, which means more time and more money, et cetera, right? So you can create the conversation around that particular work scope that would be involved with how you would plan the project. So that's what I heard you say as part of your response. The other one you mentioned had to do with money. You know, what is the amount of money that can be spent on this project? What you know, is there an available amount of time in the upcoming season to be able to get this project done for this owner? I think that those are all relevant questions that would be determined by where you're at with the client, with the customer. So if this is very, very early that the customer's reached out, maybe they don't even have any architectural plans yet, those would be relevant questions between you and the architect and the client or the owner of the $1 million home to have that conversation. But if we are at the stage where we have a set of architectural prints that we are going to be putting together a scope of work and negotiating with the owner, that we will be putting a price together based on the architectural prints that the owner has already completed with the architect, then this work breakdown structure, essentially what we are going to be doing is developing the work. And then once we develop what it is that is the work to do in this planning process, we can put a price to it. So the idea of budgeting and what the client can be able to provide or not, or finance or not finance, well, the owner is waiting for us to put that number together. So we're actually in the process of putting together a cost estimate for the owner based on this exercise of planning the work breakdown structure. Now the owner as well may say, tell me how much it's going to cost and give me a time frame, give me a preliminary schedule based on a start date, let's say, I don't know, I'm making this up, of July 1st. And so then we would then be able to take the work breakdown structure and actually put together a schedule, right? Now we're back to here. We're back to our idea between planning versus scheduling. We use the work breakdown structure to put together the plan. And we get all that information put together in our work breakdown structure here. And with that, we can put an estimate together. Now, that estimate is a cost component, but you can see here, we also can put together the schedule. So kind of the hidden feature with planning that we don't talk about in this class, because we're more focused on the scheduling piece, because we can't schedule unless we know what our scope of work is. And that's what the work breakdown structure does, is the work breakdown structure essentially is giving us a scope of work, right? That's what we want. We want a scope of work, and the work breakdown structure is kind of a complex way of saying, here's your scope of work. Once you have that scope of work, you can put together the cost, and you can put together a schedule. This class is more focused on the schedule, but we do know that we can, with this work breakdown structure, put together a cost estimate as well. In fact, that's what we would do in this process, is not only would we put a schedule together, but to your point, we would put a cost together. Does that become part of the work? Maybe at some point, if once we get the contract, we create, it's part of our plan, payment schedules. So we talk to the owner and say, the owner, we need to be paid, every 2 weeks, or we need to be paid on the month, on the 10th of each month. Here's the process. So when we're planning, to your point, Danny, we could say, maybe over here, I put an A, and over here in our key, I put A, and everyone's saying, well, what does he mean by A? A would be administrative, right? So when we plan a project, we need to have an administrative piece to our project, which means we need to communicate not only amongst ourselves, but with the owner who is going to be funding our project, the process of how we're going to administer or how we're going to manage this project. And how we manage the project is, one, we have down here in these boxes, we would have weekly meetings, and the owner's invited to those weekly meetings. We would have a payment process. So the payment process, we would have to make sure that we understand what that is, to make sure that the subcontractors who we will share this work breakdown structure with give us our invoices in a timely manner, that we can then put together our invoice as a contractor for the owner, which we will submit, in which we will direct the owner to make sure that we're paid by the 10th of each month, so on and so forth. So we could have that process. Then we would maybe have a change order process. So we would tell the subcontractors, if you come across a situation where you feel you're doing work outside of your scope, or something to that effect where you need to do extra work, you need to let us know. Here's the process to do that. So you set up the management process of the project, and you do that through the administrative breakdown of the work breakdown structure. Does that make sense? That makes sense,
I
Danny?
think it does.
Okay, because that's what you're saying, and you would be right. That you set up an administrative component. Now the intuition tells you, well, Jeff, that doesn't really have anything to do with the project, the remodel project. But you'd be wrong. It has everything to do with the remodel project, because you need to have a management structure. Hey, we're in construction management, so that would probably be the most important piece of planning our project, would be here's our management structure, guys. We need to set the processes up so everybody's on the same page. Because as you, Danny, and I know, because you have more experience in the construction industry in the field than I do, if you don't have your communications set up correctly in the field, it's likely that they're not set up in the management portion, and then everything goes to pot, right? Everyone doesn't know what the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing, right?
Exactly. That's the communication and being communicated with everybody from the beginning and
Yeah.
even before. That's the main thing, because it's just like that where you talked about where the guys come in there and they pin it up on the wall and everybody gets feedback. That's the type of job everybody wants.
Right. And so what you do in that is that's tied into setting up the value of the job trailer. So when everyone, the subs or the laborers, or whoever comes in, they check in. You have to define the job process that no one starts the job unless they check in the job trailer and check the bulletin board and see what's going on. That's, like you said, that's part of the process that you set up communication wise. So that's just an example, but that becomes part of the work breakdown structure, because the work breakdown structure is a plan. It's telling you what you need to implement, what you need to do, right? The doing part. Remember, I went over here, here's our schedule. Part of our scheduling is setting up through our work breakdown plan structure here, work breakdown structure is a plan, administrative plan as to what we're going to be doing. And what we're going to be doing is, like you just said, processes of managing that you have to define and educate your subs and your people on the job site as to what they need to be doing, and then to follow through on that, right? So the management piece of it is oversight, supervising, making sure people are following through on the process of managing the project. That one is a tough one to really collect and get around your head, because we're so focused on, well, what work needs to be done? Because we're construction guys, we do things, but we put things together physically with our hands, we assemble them. When you think about the managing process, that's not something you really do with your hands or put together. It's much more management, right? So it needs to be an educational piece early in the project. Danny, you said beginning of the project, that everyone needs to be understanding about, and we call those expectations. And good construction companies will have everybody on the job site right at the very beginning of the job, more likely in the job trailer, or maybe it's even a Zoom meeting, because we can collect more people in a Zoom meeting and make it mandated. And then the project manager and the project engineer and the field superintendent speak to, okay, guys, here's the rules of this particular project. Here's our administrative work breakdown. Listen in, because this is the expectations that we see that all of you need to follow through on. And so you go through the payment plans, you go through the check-in process when you get on site, you speak to how we are going to communicate with each other with emails and the priority of communications, right? All of these things are kind of like the infrastructure of a freeway system. If you didn't have the infrastructure of a freeway system in all these big cities, how the heck are people getting around? Right? How are people communicating with each other? How are people delivering products to each other without the freeways and the roads? If you didn't have those, you'd be SOL. Well, you need to kind of set up that type of framework within the construction project. It's like a freeway system that's getting information to everybody that needs them at all these different places. And if you've got those systems set up, then your network of managing the project is going to run smoothly. So administrative is a huge one. Good conversation there. So we got two more boxes. There could probably be up to 20 to 25, maybe even 30 boxes for this project. It depends on how, as I said earlier, how granular you want to get. Now in this particular, question.
Rogelio's in the waiting room.
Thank you, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Rocky, thanks for coming in. So this has all been tape recorded, so you'll be able to catch up. We're having a real good conversation. So I think just listen in and step in where you feel comfortable. We're talking about the work breakdown structure. And in our work breakdown structure, we've got two more kind of high level, what I would call scope of work that we need to consider for what we're doing. Rocky, is our case study is a remodel of $1 million home. It's an expansion of a room. We're calling it a family room. So it's going to be large and it's new construction, but it's an extension off of $1 million home where we like put a pool table or a ping pong table or something of that matter, where the family would be able to enjoy guests and themselves, you know, having kind of a rec room area, if you will. That being said, we're looking to plan this project, and we're using this tool that I've introduced tonight called the work breakdown structure. We've already got a number of items that have been provided by our cast of managers tonight. And so just listen in, and if you have, through our conversations, some ideas that you want to suggest, just go ahead and interrupt me and share what your ideas are. We've got 2 more boxes. And I see that Brendan is there with his mic off. Brendan, did you have a suggestion?
Can you hear me, Jeff?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm just driving, so but I'm listening. Yeah.
Well, have you been following the conversation?
Yeah, doing the work breakdown structure.
Yeah. Do you have an idea based on what you've heard so far? I mean, on our remodel project for our $1 million home, our expansion, did you hear any more details than that?
I'm still trying to figure it out.
Okay. Well, the idea is, what would you think would be a scope of work to be performed on this remodel? You understand what the remodel is, right? With your
yeah.
I mean, you have a construction background, right? A little limited,
Yeah.
but you've done construction. So
Yeah.
have you done remodeling on your home to some extent, whether it's small or little?
Oh yes.
Okay. Well, what's like the biggest thing that you think we should be thinking about on a remodel?
Oh well, you got the demo.
Okay,
Take out the
stop
old
right there.
stuff.
There you go.
Yeah.
So demolition, D. So I'm putting D for demo. So when we look at our work breakdown structure, I only have 2 boxes, but we know that there's a number of things that need to be done on the existing home to prepare it to receive an expansion of a new building, because we're adding on to this facility. So Brendan, what were some of the things that you think underneath our box of demolition, what would be some of the things that would be part of the work that we would need to do?
Well, there'd be hauling out the debris, so you'd need the trash trash fees. Maybe have one of those big boxes out front of the project.
Yep.
Rent one of those and park it there.
Yep. That's part of the work breakdown structure. Absolutely. Go ahead. Keep going. You're on a roll.
And then like taping off the areas, you want to seal off, protect the things you want to save, like the floor or different rooms. You take and make it airtight, because sheetrock's going to make a big mess. So I don't know, you secure the area.
So
There's
2 things.
safety.
I'm going to interrupt you. So 2 things. So you have to let the residents know that they cannot go into certain areas because of the dust and really maybe particles in the air that could be unhealthy. And certainly we don't want our client and their family and the existing people in the house to suffer any health damages. So we would need to be clear to set up the rules with them. That kind of leads to the administrative piece that Danny had shared earlier, where we're defining the rules of how we're going to manage the project. One of those would be speaking to the owner to make sure that there's out of bounds areas that they can't come into, unless of course they contact the field superintendent and would like a tour of areas that would be allowing us to be able to escort them, etc. Because construction is a dangerous thing, no matter how small the remodel might be. So to your point, Brendan, we would need to then set up a scope of work of making sure that we have dumpsters that are easily accessible. That's part of the site logistics that Matt had mentioned earlier. So you could put under demolition access of dumpsters, size, what size do we need, where does it go in terms of site logistics. That could be underneath site logistics, or that could be underneath the demo. Demo could be more focused on what is it that we need to demolish in order to prepare for this new remodel. And then under site logistics, the scope of work would be, what size dumpster do we need? And we wouldn't know the size dumpster we need until we identify what was the work that needs to be done through the demolition. So the point here, gentlemen, is to understand that when you do a work breakdown structure, now we start to see relationships. This is really important because that's then the tie-in that allows you to be all-encompassing, right? You're able to have full coverage of all the work that needs to be done. This really, if you think about it, is a simple way to plan, but it ends up to some extent giving you the complexities of your project, because when you step afar and look at the work breakdown structure that you put together, you're starting to see the interrelationships between all of the different scopes, which then trigger more opportunity for you to think about the project and what you need to get done, or what you need to do at some point when you actually start to execute the project. So that's great example, Brendan, the demolition. You must have a couple more based on your experiences of things that we need to look out for when we do the demo. You have a couple more? Without getting in an accident if you're driving? I don't know if you're talking, Brendan, your green light's on, but I don't know if we're actually receiving your signal. But anyway, that's a good contribution. And we know through the demolition portion that there's a number of things that we need to consider. And you can see the tie-in to other parts of the work breakdown structure that are valued and that are super important. How do we administer the demo? And then there's connections of the demo work to things, pieces of equipment, items that would be part of the project, like the dumpster itself, like what size dumpster do we need? And then to the extent of whoever we hire as the dumpster vendor to pick up our materials, our dumpster materials, you know, how often are they going to be coming on a weekly basis? And then we can, you know, further get an idea of what that might be as well. So you can kind of see we already have a vision through our process of planning. All of us in our heads, based on the information I've given us, have an idea about this remodel and what work we would need to do. We've got one more box. Does anybody want to give a shot of maybe something that's triggered in your head that we haven't talked about that we could include in that last box?
Maybe like a safety plan or something along those lines.
Okay, Matt, that's great.
I know safety is a really, really big thing, so I'm sure there's a very large portion set aside for safety plans and looking at the site in advance, maybe to come up with potential issues for safety.
Matt, I think that's a great suggestion. And what I would, if I were leading this team of great construction managers, if you guys were on my business and I was running this business and we were having this Zoom meeting just as we're talking about this Zoom remodel, because this is reality. This could be something that we could actually do. And I would feel extremely confident with everybody here on this Zoom meeting that we as a project team would be able to do this remodel. Your contribution of safety is huge, Matt. Now, what I would do, and here's my thinking, if I'm facilitating. Now, I could put safety in this box because it is a huge part of the work that we do on a project. But what I would do is I would take that safety and I would actually put it under A of the administrative piece, because safety will be part of how we would administer the project, how we would manage the project. So down here, I would put safety as one of the boxes. And then within that, break that box down here into maybe these 3 items. And those 3 items could be, you know, analyzing safety hazards on our project. So we would have to identify the safety hazards for our particular project. So hazards. Here would be, once we know the hazards, put together a plan. And then maybe this last one would be distribute plan to the subcontractors. So part of our administrative scope of work would be to put together and identify that safety work needs to be defined. Let's define that safety work. Here's our hazards. Here's our plan to deal with the hazards that we've defined. And then we need to communicate that safety plan to the subcontractors. Good work, good work. And did you follow what I did? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
So let me see if I can contribute something to this final box, and then we're going to take a 15-minute break. We've got materials, we've got subs, we got the site logistics plan and the items that we need to create and stage our project. We've got a demolition plan. Now, I'm not saying this is 100%. This is just a sampling of the process of doing a work breakdown structure. We probably, if we were in a room together, we'd probably be able to knock this thing out, I would say 90 minutes to a couple hours, and really have probably 75 to 80% of the work that we would need to do in order to do this project. Now, if we had a set of architectural plans, it would probably go faster because we would know further to what the extent of the work would be. We have an administrative plan, and I'm glad that we caught this administrative one because sometimes it's not thought about. We get so focused on the work that needs to be done, which is the construction work, which makes sense because that's what we are. We're construction guys. We miss out on the leadership piece. You know, A could be L. It could be leadership. How are we leading the project as a company, as a construction company, to do this remodel? So A is administrative. It's much more technical in terms of how do we implement, how do we administer the project, but really administration is a subset of how do we lead? How are we leaders on a construction project, and how do we make sure that it runs smoothly and that we deliver the remodel as it states in the plans and the specs? So I'm thinking here, what's remaining, it could be like framing, right? I'll put F for framing. Now,
I know I was a little late, but
would you have an idea?
About like getting permitting and making sure everything's up to code with the city.
I agree. Do you think that could go under administrative? As far as leadership, working with the powers that be to make sure that we have everything we need to actually begin and perform the project? That's my idea.
Probably. Like I just missed that piece, so I wasn't sure if that was
Right,
mentioned.
but you understand the concept of what we're talking about here, right?
Yep.
Where we have kind of a high level, let's break it down in high level chunks. But then as we look at those high level chunks, and there's no right or wrong on this, by the way, but as we break down the high level chunks, we break those high level chunks into even smaller chunks, if you will. And then we take those smaller chunks and even break them down into even smaller chunks, right? So you really get, as I was saying here, granularity, that we really get down to I've used this term, and I think Danny, you used this term in one of your discussion posts or I've heard it recently. We really get down to the nitty gritty, which we all know what that means, right? But we really do get down to that nitty gritty. I think that's a great suggestion, and I'm going to put permits over here under administrative. So I would put P here for permits. So P is for permits. And then I had safety over here for safety. So safety is just what it means. Safety is same. And then underneath safety, I have the breakdown of what we would consider important items to be able to study and to be able to get our ideas in definition of what these things mean for our project. For permits, I'm going to put a few boxes underneath for permit here. And I know I have to kind of come out of my way here and go like this, but you guys understand the idea. So on your permit side, real quick, Rocky, you mentioned a couple things. Did you say speak to your mind again. I want to hear what your thoughts were.
Well, I just like typically when you're doing an expansion on a house, you have to get approval from the city. And
Okay.
that means you have to submit drawings and you have to make sure everything's up to code.
City. So I wrote in real tiny here, city approval. And then anything else? What's the one thing that you're constantly doing on the job site in terms of coordinating?
We're just always making sure everything's up to code.
Right. And then in what form does that take? How does the city know that?
Permits. You pull a permit.
Right. But then how does the city engage with you once the permit is pulled?
Inspectors.
There you go. So you have to have an inspection plan. You have to then, when you break down on your administrative side, have to understand that the city needs to review your plans. So you understand that there's a plan review process, that you can't build the building until you get a building permit. Now, sometimes that is a reliance on the owner. Sometimes there's your contribution as a builder. Regardless, you can't do a project without the building permit. So whether you're compensated for it or not, I would be involved, especially if you have the contract or you're negotiating, and pretty likely you're going to get the contract. I would get involved with the owner and the architect and the city, get face value out of knowing that you're the contractor, and start building that relationship with the city, because as we all know, they are crucial to projects and could potentially delay the project if you don't pass inspection. And which leads to the next scope of work is, what is the process of inspection? As you know, Rocky, being a field manager now, and Danny, I think you've had experience, and even you, Brendan, in doing remodels. If you're not aware of the inspection process that the city has, that is giving them the notification, the required notifications, not looking and forgetting an inspection and then doing a special inspection, which will cost you money if you were lucky enough that they would come out and do a special inspection. So understanding the inspection process is valuable, because if you're talking about that in the planning stage, you're preparing for it and there will be no surprises. And if you are involved with the city in terms of the discussions prior to them issuing the building permit, and show your research and your understanding of their process, they will respect you even more and know that you are on top of your game because you're a good planner of construction projects. So again, I would put that under administrative, under P for permits, and then plan for supporting the architect and the owner and getting the permit, because a lot of times builders are involved in that process and are helpful in that process, as well as knowing the inspections that are needed for your project, and knowing all the different trades and whatnot are required, certainly as it relates to their work. And whether it's covered under your umbrella as a general contractor or a construction manager, or whether it's under the responsibility of that particular trade. Well, if you're running the job, you better know, regardless if it's in your scope of work or not. You can't just rely on the plumber, say, hey man, you're supposed to call for inspection. It's your job to do that. It's in your scope of work. No, that to me, that's not acceptable. If you're a field superintendent running the job, you better know when the plumbing inspections are going to happen, and you better make darn sure that you're having those communications with the plumber saying, all right, I am aware that you need to have a plumbing inspection. Have you called for it? Have you taken care of it? Right? That's your job as a super. So you need to make sure that you're on top of your game. You know that because when you plan the project, even before the project starts, you've planned that and know that that's viable because you put together a work breakdown structure. Okay. So I'm going to pause on the recording. I want everyone to take a 15-minute break. We'll come back and we'll do a little bit more discussion on the work breakdown structure. And then I'm going to break you guys out, and we're going to do some quick little down and dirty exercise that'll break you out into breakout rooms, and hopefully, really engage a little bit more about how planning, particularly putting together work breakdown structure, will be of value as you move towards scheduling, which is the bulk of what this course is project management and putting together a schedule. But we can't put together good, solid schedules without understanding the work breakdown structure. So I'm going to give us an exercise to really start to begin to get a feel of how that might look, how that might work, how we kind of transition from work to putting together a schedule. All right, so let's take a 15-minute break. It's 7:13 now. Let's all come back about 7:30, and we'll get started on the second portion of tonight's course. And then after that exercise, we'll probably call it an evening because it'll be fairly late, and I don't want to really hold you guys up until 9 o'clock. All right, so 15-minute break. Come back at 7:30, and see you shortly.
Sounds good.
Recording. So we're back recording, and what you should see, are you guys seeing what should be, are you guys seeing, I just want to make sure you're seeing what I'm seeing. I'm moving the screen. You guys see me moving the screen?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
we see it.
Okay, thanks, Danny. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the exercise. From the sounds of it, everybody did a really nice job, and there really isn't any right or wrong. I mean, it's a drag and locate, and the exercise in and of itself, working as a group, as a team, is very much related to what you would see in in construction project management done right. When I say construction project management done right, that is really it's a collective. It's getting everybody who's involved with the project and who will have to some degree I call it an ownership stake. It's not like you own the project, but you have an ownership in what you are providing for in the project, whether it be your service, whether it be your trade skill, whether it be you as a manager. That contribution, if you're with a team working with everybody on the team and everyone has a relationship because they know we're counting on each other to do good work, this is a type of exercise that really brings a team together. And if construction project management is done right, you as future leaders, as administrators of projects, are going to use a tool like this. Now, whether you keep this tool and hold on to it, I want you to use it. If you can change it around to make it work for your job, do it, or create your own type of practice that uses these concepts and ideas. Whether and I'm using Rocky as an example, but Rocky, whether you're running one of your jobs and you've got some really important work to be done in a time scale that's of value, and you have 5 weeks to do it, in the week prior to when you get started, bring your team together and put together this type of process and this type of schedule. Break down the work based on the plans and get everybody on the same page and really show your muster on how you can manage a project. And I think this is really important. Now, what I'm going to show you later on the course is how we would take this type of practice and be able to build a Gantt chart, to actually build a bar chart in Microsoft Project, let's say, to be able to actually put together a schedule that you can communicate with subcontractors on, because they will register their understanding of the schedule based on the bar chart, which many of us use in the industry. So we haven't gotten there yet. We're learning the basics of how we plan and then how we can start to think about building that schedule. And so little tidbits here and there that get us to a point where by the end of the course, you're going to be very confident in your ability to go onto the job site and or be in the office and be able to deliver on schedules. Now, with this particular exercise, from what I could see, you all did really well. The idea certainly, and I'm not going to, because it's late, we could probably put in another 15 to 20 minutes of interaction and participation. Not necessary. You guys got enough of that in your breakout, and from what I could see, did a really nice job. But you can see what I've done here. The sequence is, and this is why I kind of like the PowerPoint and the use of the slides. I want to hide that. Hold on a second. I'm just trying to create some more space here. I'm trying to get rid of these speaker notes, and I don't know how to get rid of those speaker notes. Maybe I need to, there we go. That's what I want to do, create more space there. So you can see with the slides, and as we maneuver through the slides, now I just lost my slides to the left. There we come back to them. Each is color coordinated, as you can see, but it relates to each of the different summary tasks. I'm going to refer to these as summary tasks, which are first tier chunks of work that are part of our construction project in this case. So yellow slide is a summary task for earthwork. So, I position earthwork, and I asked you to then take these scopes of work and create a sequence. And so I'm just blindly doing this. This may not be your sequence. There is no right or wrong, but I read survey as, I got to get the lay of the land and get my stakes, get my elevations all in place before I can do anything. So I'm going to survey the site first. Then I'm going to do my earthwork through excavation. Then I'll kind of do my rough grading and fine grading, and then maybe backfill areas where I require that. Now, your logic might not be mine. I'm going through this very quickly. So there can be some nuance, I get that. But this is the idea. So I kind of situate my earthwork, and these are my work packages. Now, I know my work packages are very broad and very general in nature. And so literally, as you guys remember, I kind of cut out and created a little window that I did a layover on my work breakdown structure on paper. I would do the same thing here. I would pull out survey and create a whole slide, just like you see earthwork here, but I would call it survey. And I would do another breakdown of the survey. What do I need? What is required for the survey? And that would be done with each one of these boxes down here. So you can see we begin to get granular as we look to identify our work packages. And when we identify work within the work package, that is to say, when we identify work within the survey, what we're doing is we're really defining what are the tasks and the activities that are involved with the survey. And that might be 3 to 5 to 7 activities, possibly 10. You're really getting to the level of that you can really define the work that's needed in your project. So here, foundation, so I'm just gonna do a little bit of dragging and locating here because I want it to be set up in a way that's consistent to what I've shared with you tonight. So I'm looking at the activities, concrete forms, set rebar, remove concrete forms, concrete pour. I think we'll do the forms first. Then I'll set my rebar. Then I'll do my concrete pour, and then I'll remove the forms, right? Something to that extent. And so I've got that sequence built. Now I've also, at the same time, got my work breakdown structure, and we'll be able to address each one of these work packages in a more detailed way by breaking these items out into tasks and activities. With my structure, same thing. Order roof trusses, frame walls, install frame roof trusses, frame the first floor. Well, the roof trusses are going to be probably the last thing I do because that's going to be above me and I have to have all the other things built before I can do that. So that's going to be towards the end of this sequence. The first floor needs to be built before I can frame the wall. So I'm kind of re-engineering my things here, knowing that I have to install, frame the roof trusses later. The walls need to be in place before I can set my trusses. I need my floor in place before I can frame my walls. And then I'm going to order my trusses obviously early in the process so they arrive on time and that I can have them available to me to be able to install. Now I can ask also the question, what is it going to take to order my trusses? So I could take that as a work package and develop the tasks and activities that I need to do in order to order those roof trusses and make sure that they arrive on time so I can make sure that they're installed during the course of construction. Same questions. What is part of the first floor frame? What do I need to do labor wise? What materials do I need to make sure are here on time so my carpenters have the materials they need to be able to frame that first floor? Same for the walls, so on and so forth. You guys, I think, are seeing a pattern to this. So now I come to utilities, and utilities are unique, certainly. I've got 5 activities that are listed here. Trenching, setting up the erosion sedimentation control plan. Many of you have taken Keys class on what that's all about. Underground sewer and water utilities, underground electrical utilities, underground stormwater. So the first thing that I see here, and I know this was brought up in one of the discussions, that there may be some concurrency with a lot of this work. I understand that, but that can be an additional dive later in our discussions on the project. Right now, I just want to get down and dirty and just set something up. So I'm just going to say that we need to set up the test control plan early on. Having done that, at some point we'll begin the work. We'll let's say do the trenching work, and that when I look at what utilities I want to be done first, second, third, I'm not sure if there is a standard or a sequence universally accepted in the field of what would be before another item. But maybe we'll go with stormwater and sewer, or sewer and water first, then stormwater, and then in the end, maybe electric. Now, I'm just talking, there could be more details involved with how you would set up this sequence. And so I'll leave that to a more detailed discussion with my superintendent, maybe in a couple days, as we look at the plans and talk to the utilities and get an idea of what's going on there related to our scope of work. But then again, I can look at each one of these boxes as work packages and begin to think about how could I take just one of these boxes and break down the tasks and activities that would make up the work of this project, right? So now you're really getting, like I said, granular. You're really understanding the details that will allow you to put a cost to that task or activity, that will allow you to put a time duration on that task and activity. Cost and duration, basically cost and time, are really the big parts of what make up a construction project. How much something costs so we can manage that cost, and then what is the time duration that we estimate for that particular activity. Much of what we're doing is estimating at this time. Yes, we could estimate costs if we know what the activity is. Yes, we estimate the duration of an activity if we know what the activity is. So this process of work breakdown structure really breaks it down to allow us to get to those core elements of cost and time. Interiors, again, very broad, but for this exercise, I think manageable. So here I see that we have interiors usually done after the framing is complete. I think though we would want, again, probably get the plumbing, electrical, HVC in the walls, so to speak, in the floor, in the walls. Then let's see, probably want then to give cover to that. So the drywall for the plumbing, rough and electrical in the walls. Then, you know, flooring is a finish item, and doors would be more apt to be towards the end, I think. Again, Danny, I would rely on your experience here if I were having this discussion, but you know, we can have that, you know, conversation later. Get the walls painted, then maybe come in with the flooring and maybe the doors towards the end. I don't want to get any paint on the doors and get those installed. So there may be something look like that. Now, I'm broadly speaking, this probably isn't truly the logic of how it happened, but at least it gives me a starting point and a conversation piece. So then when I do get to those trades, or when I get with my superintendent, I can have these more detailed conversations. And more than likely, there's probably going to be some concurrency. That when I say concurrency, that these work packages likely will occur at the same time, maybe in different parts of the space. When I again look at these work packages, I can break them down. I can break them down and get time and cost related to the division of how I break down those work packages. Lastly, it looks like here I've got the exterior work. So there's my exterior, a summary task. I've got siding, windows, insulation, roofing. The installation of the exterior walls, there may be some coordination obviously needed with some of the rough-in with the electrical. So there may be some crossover between these two, but right now I'm not going to get all bent out of shape about that. I'm just going to say insulation at the exterior walls would need to come first. Maybe you know, after the installation, we do the exterior siding. Maybe, you know, actually we probably want to get a closed in more quickly. Or maybe we do, you know, roofing, then we are closed in, which allows us then to do the insulation. We might then, if walls are up, we can start the exterior siding. And then, or maybe we want to do this, get the windows in, and then we can then do the exterior siding. Oops, gripped the wrong thing there. Do something like that. Now, again, I'm just generating conversation. This may be what you guys did. There's no right or wrong, but that's the point, is the conversation and the dialogue. And so then again, now we've got each one of these work packages that we can start to even more define in detail to be able to identify and allow us to estimate those tasks. How long will it take? We can estimate how much will it cost, and really get a good idea of what the project's all about. This final slide, what I've done here is some what I would call groupings. And of these groupings, I'm going to try and get a little bit closer view of these groupings. But you can see here in that first slide for earthwork, I kind of did a grouping up here. For that second slide, it looks like for concrete work, I did a grouping there. Or it looks like, what was that slide with the order of the trusses? I don't remember what that slide was. But you can see the framing grouping here, a utility grouping here. So I kind of took all of what we had done earlier in terms of a linear sequence, and I just kind of grouped them, as you can see here. And then now the idea here, looking at all of the groupings of those activities, you could list them and show them in a linear fashion, similar to what you did in the original slides. Or this is a conversation, maybe after the completion of the first round of setting up the linear sequences and having conversations about scope of work, to that regard, you could now maybe get a little bit more advanced and be able to take these items. I got to get out of this because I keep expanding. Sorry about that, fellas. Get out of this mode of Zoom and start looking at these task activities, and maybe they're linear or maybe there's some concurrency. So as I look at what I did earlier, I think I had survey starting out, and then I did some excavation. Then I did some grading, and maybe the grading can start as I'm going from left to right. I don't have any start times, but what I have is logic. And so when I stack to some degree, like you see here, what I'm saying is that I can do the surveying, but I can't start my excavating until I'm done with the survey. So then I start my surveying, but maybe, or start my excavation, that maybe at some point when I'm excavating on one side of the project, maybe I can begin and get another piece of equipment in there, start grading on the side that I've excavated, right? So I'm kind of doing two things at the same time. And then maybe we're done with the grading, then I can go ahead, pull one of those backhoes off the job, keep the one equipment on the job site, and they can finish the backfill. Now, when I look at the second grouping, which is my utilities, or which is my concrete, now that the backfill is complete, it might be that I can begin to put together my concrete forms, perhaps, at the time that maybe they're just wrapping up the backfill. So I kind of put there with a little bit of a stack towards the end there. Again, I'm not using specifics like time frames or durations. I'm just creating logic that might give me a visual of how I could see the work progressing out on the job site. So here, concrete forms. After the concrete forms, I will set the rebar. Maybe there's a little bit of overlap there because I can do some concurrent work at the same time, setting forms and setting rebar. Then when the rebar is set, then logic is I've got to get everything else off the job site because I need to pour the concrete. And then when the concrete is done and poured, then maybe I have something that looks like this. So I would probably have to do a couple things, maybe make my boxes a little bit smaller to kind of fit it on my orange background. My other grouping is just underneath here, so I'd bring this grouping up there. Again, talk about how I would sequence it and set it up similar to what I've done here. My boxes are fairly large, so I probably wouldn't be able to fit them all on this one slate. So maybe I make them a little bit smaller, or I think through the exercise, you can actually take the boxes and pull them off to the side like this. So you could continue to complete the exercise and follow through. I keep them in groupings because they are activities that are related, even though I know that there may be in the true aspect of how this project would be managed, that you may have a box that could be, carried up to the front here, just because the logic may make sense that way to do so. So I'm not diminishing that, but that would be really fine tuning it at maybe a second or third, what we would call iteration or cycle of going through, working with your team and figuring out what would be the best sequence. So that's kind of how you would use this final slide as a team builder in terms of how people would come to agreement or disagreement, but then coming to terms as to what everybody could live with as to how they would set up the relationships of sequencing, as you can see here from left to right. And what they do call it in industry, at least in the project management world, is when you go top down from left to right in this direction, it's kind of what they call a waterfall effect. So the waterfall effect, because you're using concurrency, you're using kind of the stacking element to create what is the logic to your project in terms of the relationships and the sequencing of how the project would unfold. You're really going from top left down to the bottom right, and they kind of call that in lingo a waterfall effect, because you're looking to create that element of time going from left to right. We still don't have any durations estimated to them. We're just still kind of working with the logic and how these relationships would work with each other. So from what I had seen in my visits with each of the teams is that that's the idea. And I think that you are all moving towards that end of doing the work in that particular way. Okay, so that's the idea of this exercise. It really is, I think, a great tool. This exercise that we did online, and how it is supportive of what we talked about earlier tonight, which is, you know, the generation of a work breakdown structure. And so I'm going to leave it at that, but I do want to open up the floor to any of you who might have questions.
I just had a question, Jeff. I was going to ask you about the Microsoft project to get familiar with that. Is that something that we can download like the Microsoft Office program?
Yeah, so there's a Microsoft project that you can download, get a free academic version, and I will provide that at the appropriate time. I don't want to give it to you now because I don't want us to get too overwhelmed with too much information, and I don't want you to dabble into the software, because I am very particular in how I want you to approach the Microsoft project software that I think give you the confidence and allow you to be effective immediately on your projects. So literally what I'm saying is that through what we're doing in this course in terms of learning and developing our understanding of planning and scheduling, that by the end of the course, I believe that if you're working in the job site and you're in a capacity to be able to create and generate a schedule, that the skills that you'll learn in the next several weeks, you'll be able to take to the job site.
Good stuff.
And I think to be fairly confident in the work that you would do, trusting in these tools that I'm sharing with you, and given the opportunity to use these tools that I'm sharing with you and then build schedules, I think you guys will knock it out of the park. I really do. And so I'm excited to teach the stuff because I think it's creative. A lot of times you think in a technical environment as a manager that you can't be creative, but you can. And that's what makes it fun for me to teach it, but also I wanted to make it exciting for you to understand that you have an element of experience in your backgrounds of working in the industry currently and what you've been able to build over time in your mind, both your successes and failures, to be able then to take that as an investment of learning and use it in a creative element, which is building schedules, and really enjoy the fact that you are of value, that you are an asset to your company because you're able to do that. And believe me, if you can show and share with your company that you have these skills, they're not going to ever want to lay you off. They're going to want you to like hang around for a while because you know your stuff. And so that's, I hope, giving you the confidence to feel good about the work that you do, but also too, to give you the confidence that, you know, what I am doing is legit. What I am doing is providing value to my company, whether you're working for a general contractor or whether you work for a developer or an owner or a city or a government entity, that you know your stuff and that you would be able to generate this type of information for any type of project that you're working on. So great question, Danny, but I don't want you to get too caught up right now worrying about that. We'll have ample time to introduce you to those tools that will help you put together a schedule that you will be proud of, that you can share with at your workplace.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it is 8:48. Here's what we're going to do. So each of you have this exercise. You've been able to work with your team and really get an idea and indication of the exercise and getting involved with your team. I'm going to create this as a homework assignment. So for you individually, you will, take your learnings from your colleagues tonight in the exercise, and then generate and create a final product using what you've downloaded. So hold on to it. I'll create the assignment in the Canvas module for you to then put it together and then generate the final product. Really, what I'm going to be asking you to do is what we've been doing, but on an individual basis. So whatever you learned in your collaborative effort with your team tonight, take that information. If you had one person kind of do all of the maneuvering and doing the drag and locating, have them send you that attachment so you have it. And then the real work that I want students to think about would be this final slide. is that how can you build a waterfall, right? I'm calling it a waterfall. Can you build the waterfall and create a logic of these activities? You have the groupings. Now just kind of create a more defined logic going from top left down to the bottom right, to where you have maybe some slight concurrency, but also a logic that kind of keeps the groups together, but maybe have a little bit of overlap if you kind of can see that. Kind of what I did here, the little bit of overlap would be, you know, looking at what you might see here. Oops, I got too close. What you might see here with the grouping of the, let's say here, where you have a little bit of overlap here. With these activities here, after you remove the concrete forms, you know, you can immediately, maybe, oops, sorry, gosh darn it. I have here the order of the roof trusses. So maybe you have an order of the roof trusses overlapping here, maybe at the time that you start the concrete forms. Your goal is, I need to get those roof trusses ordered because they're going to take, you know, 2 weeks to manufacture. So maybe you start that logic there, and then after you remove the concrete forms, you're ready to install the first floor. So there's the first floor right there. Then after the first floor is you frame the walls. So you really can't frame the walls until the first floor is entirely framed. And then here you would install the trusses, because you really can't install the trusses until the walls are framed. It could be that roof trusses take a while to manufacture. So you might maybe pull this concurrent all the way back here along the time when you start your excavation, because you can see how it aligns with the excavation. Maybe when your goal is, I'm ordering the roof trusses at the time we start the excavation, or for that matter, maybe you order the roof trusses at the beginning of the job when they start the survey, because it takes a long time and there's a long line, or you're got to get into the queue in order for those roof trusses to be built. And as many of you know in our industry, ordering is huge. If we don't get the order in on time, we don't want to be at a point where we've installed we've framed our walls and we're unable to begin the installation of roof trusses because we didn't order them on time, right? So you get the idea. You get the idea. But the groupings, relatively speaking, will stay within context and stay within the waterfall. So you can see here, I've almost done half of it, and I've, you know, still got a few groupings here left still to create that logic. And again, if your logic rolls off the page, that's fine. Continue to, you know, keep it as it is. Don't try and squeeze everything so tight together that it's hard for you to read or for me to read. When you're done, save it as a Microsoft PowerPoint, and then you'll post it as a Microsoft PowerPoint in the assignment. And I'll make that clear in the instructions when I set it up in the module. All right. Okay, you guys. Good work tonight. And I will let you off, and we stayed for a long time, but I hope it was a worthwhile endeavor tonight. Really appreciate you guys coming in.